This is about my special and precious mum, who was my best friend. I used to ring my mum about 4 times a day to check she was all right, but the best phone call was the nighttime one when she had done all her work and I had done mine, and we could talk and confide and pray. She would never let any of my confidences out, and she made me feel safe. I would always say, "Good night, Mum, I love you, and thank you for being my mum." So she always knew that she was loved.
Today's service is such a wonderful combination of elements. Some of them speak of important family memories, like Love Divine, which John and Sylvia had at their wedding. And some of them speak of important personal memories, like Besame Mucho. Liz told us that after her dad had died, Sylvia would always put her to bed and they would have a giggle with that particular song. And then there are, of course, hymns and readings which speak of Sylvia's faith. For anyone who knew Sylvia, it's hard to deny that her faith was important to her. As Mark said to Mike and I the other day, it was her life. And if you're not an avid follower of Jesus Christ, then I expect Sylvia will have tried on numerous occasions to convert you. She loved her God and wanted everyone else to experience God in the way that she had in Jesus Christ. She was an active member and elder at the chapel, and she was also involved with St. Peter's. Certainly, for me, I remember Sylvia as a woman of faith, and more specifically, a woman of prayer. Now, I've only known Sylvia for just the last 6 years, and that's a period when her mobility was increasingly limited, but what she lacked physically, she certainly made up for in spirit. Sylvia wasn't just a woman of prayer, she was a prayer warrior. The hymn we had at the start sums up her approach very well. What a friend we have in Jesus. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Have we trials and troubles and temptations? Well, take it to the Lord in prayer. Are we weak and heavy laden? Well, take it to the Lord in prayer. If ever there was a problem or a concern in relation to the chapel or the village, she would always say, "Oh, we'd better pray about it." And that psalm we just heard, a psalm that asks the pilgrims on their way to the temple in Jerusalem to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, well, that was one of Sylvia's passions, to pray for Israel, to pray for peace in that land. She was involved in a monthly prayer meeting for that for a number of years, and she was also instrumental to other prayer meetings as well. Maureen remembers the sign Sylvia had in the living room: "Life is fragile, handle with prayer." Sylvia was convinced that praying makes a difference. I suppose it all stemmed back to that day when Sylvia and John took Liz somewhat sceptically to a healing service. The story goes that they only heard about it one day by chance, by spotting an advertisement on a newspaper that had been used to wrap some parsnips in. They'd tried everything to get Liz to speak. I remember Sylvia telling me, "Well, we thought we'd go and see what it was all about. We had nothing to lose." And you may have heard the story a few times, and I really don't know how many times she must have told it. But when Sylvia was telling me how they left that meeting and got into the car and 6-year-old Liz spoke her first words, "Thank you, Jesus," it was like she was telling me for the very first time. There was such a genuine smile on her face and that twinkle in her eye. I suspect that from that day on, Sylvia prayed with all her heart for Liz because she experienced that prayer had made a difference. And I bet she's said prayers for each one of us gathered here. She longed for all to know the peace of that psalm. Peace in Hebrew is the word shalom, and it's a broader word than what we sometimes think of when we say peace in English. It doesn't just mean an end to conflict or a nice, tranquil lake. It carries a deeper sense of being safe and whole and well. So in our other reading, the one from Revelation, we get a vision of final peace, the New Jerusalem, the city symbolizing the very presence of God, comes down from the heavens. From the sky it comes and fuses with the earth so that there is no more tears, there's no more death or mourning or pain. In this life, Sylvia knew her share of those things, as we all do, to varying degrees. But this is the other thing that strikes me about Sylvia. Because she already knew God's presence, because she already had a foretaste of that vision in Revelation, she was at peace. Despite the tears and death and mourning and pain, she was able to keep a positive outlook on life and see that God was with her, even carrying her. Earlier on we sang, "Bless the Lord, O my soul," which has that line, "For all your goodness I will keep on singing, 10,000 reasons for my heart to find." Well, I think Sylvia would have found 100,000 reasons. As a church minister, it's always a joy to meet church members who humble you with their prayerfulness, their thankfulness and their faith. Sylvia was one of those church members. We will all miss her greatly. May her legacy of faithful love and loving faith continue to enrich us all until that day when there will be no more tears, death, mourning, or pain.
Sylvia was born here in Monks Ely, second child to Bill and Ethel Game, on the 2nd of June 1929. She had 4 brothers, Fred, Roy, Bob and Keith, and a sister, Joyce. Sylvia attended Monks Ely School and was educated there until she left at the age of 15 and made many friends, one of which was Dora, an evacuee from London. To help the war effort, they regularly visited and worked at Wattisham Airfield, where the American 8th Air Force Fighter Group was based from 1944. It was here that she developed her love for American swing music and dancing, especially Glenn Miller. After the war, she had a variety of jobs, from secretarial, nanny and housekeeper. In the early 50s, she met her would-be husband John and became Sylvia Roberts when they married at Monks Ely in September 1951 at the United Reformed Chapel. They moved out to Hadley and then to a small cottage in the village of Upper Layham. Here she had 2 children, Anthony and Mark. In 1964, the family returned to live in Monks Ely. Sadly, in 1966, the family suffered the sad loss of Anthony in a tragic accident. In 1968, along came Elizabeth. As time progressed, Sylvia devoted her life to caring and bringing up Elizabeth. In 1971, the family moved into the manse, and not long after that she became a member of the chapel and renewed her Christian faith. After a short illness in 2003, her husband John passed away after 51 years of marriage. Sylvia continued to live at the manse until May this year, when she moved to Fimbra Court and sadly passed away peacefully after a short time. Sylvia led an active role in church and village affairs, One that we will always remember is the Monday Club in the late 70s. Fun for everyone. For all but a few years, she spent all her life in Monks Ely, a place she really called home. She will be missed by us all and remembered by many more.